Right, afternoon everybody. Welcome to this afternoon's Strategic Planning Committee. If I can just remind people to put their phones on silent or switch them off. Membership of the committee, we are, i.e. my group, are one member down who unfortunately is in hospital in Manchester. The others as printed. Item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. Can I pass those as a true record? Thank you. Right, item 3, declarations of interest and lobbying. I'll start with Councillor Davies.
Thanks, Chair. None from me, thank you.
Councillor Pattison.
None from me, thank you.
Councillor Pinnock.
Thank you, Chair. Over the years, I've had lots of comments from local residents about this site, whether specifically about this application or about the site in general. And I've said the same as I would normally do. I can't give you an opinion, although generally speaking, I would say that local board members are, in principle, in favour. And I believe I have also had notification of something from objectors on the Almondbury site.
So can I just to confirm, Councillor Pinnock, when you said the site, you do mean the Cleckheaton site is the site you're referring to, wasn't it?
Sorry, I do apologise. Yeah, that one. But as I say, I think I've had a representation from one of the objectors to the Lepton site. So I declare that.
Councillor Thompson.
None, Chair.
Councillor Armour.
Yes, Chair. Excuse me. The reference item 10, which is the Lepton Great Woods and Hermitage Park application number 2022/91735. This has been discussed at Kirkburton Parish Council, of which I am a member, and I have received a relatively small number of emails generally against this. I did not vote on anything to do with this at Parish Council. I've not responded to emails.
Right, thanks, Bill. I've received correspondence about page 17, which is the Lepton application, and also page 75, which is the Cleckheaton application, and no action taken. Item 6, deputations and petitions.
None received.
Good. Right, site visits. There were a bit of a faux pas by our bus driver this morning, so he got into Huddersfield late. The first site visit should have been at Cleckheaton, but we did attend that not all that long ago, so it's we had to do some juggling about, but it was agreed that we wouldn't have learned a right lot by going on that site visit anyway, seeing as it's not changed as it was before. The other site visit we did was to Hermitage Park at Lepton. Next, planning applications, item 10. This is Hermitage Park, Lepton, and it's Nick.
Thank you, Chair. Good day, members. My name is Nicholas Hurst, Case Officer for this application. The application seeks outline planning permission for the erection of 80 dwellings at land off Hermitage Park in Lepton. The matters of layout and access have been applied for as part of this application. The considerations of appearance, scale and landscaping are reserved matters to be addressed as part of a later application. Through you, Chair, shall I continue? Thank you. Right. This application seeks outline planning permission for the erection of 80 dwellings at Land off Hermitage Park in Lepton. The matters of layout and access have been applied for as part of this application. The considerations of appearance, scale and landscaping are reserved matters to be addressed as part of a later application. The site would be accessed from Hermitage Park. Existing dwellings border the site to the north and west, with Lepton Greatwood to the east. The site is previously undeveloped land, with ground levels falling from northeast to southwest. There is Lepton Greatwood on the eastern side there. Tree belts subdivide the land. The land is this parcel, and this one, as well as continuing down further there. This site is part of a housing allocation, HS3, within the local plan. Allocation HS3 has a total area of 12.5 hectares, with this allocation relating to approximately half of the allocation. However, the application site has sizable areas of undevelopable land for ecological, arboricultural and heritage reasons, and therefore, while half of the allocation is not expected to accommodate half of the indicative capacity for HS3, which is 312 dwellings, as set out within the local plan. As required by the local plan, applications on either HS2 or HS3 are required to include a joint master plan across the two allocations. Allocation HS1, which is a separate allocation, is shown for information purposes only. The purpose of the master plan is to indicatively show how these sites may be developed in a coherent and consistent way. The master plan has previously been presented to the committee as part of application 2020-92307, which saw outline permission for up to 75 units and related to phase 1 of the master plan's development, which can be seen in the pink area. That application was approved by the committee at the meeting on the 8th of December, with the formal determination currently pending the completion of a Section 106 agreement. The current application relates to phase 2. Phases 1 and 2 would be accessed off Rowley Lane, with phase 2 via Hermitage Park, and phases 3 and 4 would be accessed via Penistone Road via a new highways infrastructure expected to be a roundabout. As was secured as part of phase 1 approval, the applicant for phase 2 would contribute towards the implementation of the roundabout. The image is the master plan layout for both allocations. It aims to establish a high-level understanding of how the allocations may be developed in the future and how they may respond to the site's constraints. This includes demonstrating non-development areas, areas appropriate for housing, open space and both pedestrian and vehicle connectivity in and through the site. The application site is circled in red for information. It is considered that the master plan layout is an attractive approach to the site and is welcomed by officers. It manages to address the constraints of the allocation appropriately. The master plan also includes an indicative design code for the proposed dwellings, which subdivides the allocation into a variety of design areas to provide a framework and parameters for future development. So progressing from the master plan to the specifics of the application before members now, the report before members outlines officers' full and detailed assessment of the proposal. To summarise the report, the image shows the layout of the proposed development. The proposal has a density of 25 dwellings per hectare within the developable area. The local plan seeks typically for a development density of 35 dwellings per hectare where appropriate. The lower density proposed is considered to be a reasonable response to the constraints of the site and more appropriately reflects local character. The proposal includes a good mixture of 2, 3 and 4 bed dwellings that again responds well to local needs. Therefore, the proposal is considered an effective and efficient use of a housing allocation. In terms of design, as noted, appearance, scale and landscaping are reserved matters. However, the proposed layout is considered to be attractive and would harmonise well with the surrounding area. The proposal has considered local heritage assets, including views to and from them. This includes a no-build area to the rear of Kirklees, indicated there, and through the centre of the site, enabling long-distance views between Woodsum Hall, the site, and Lepton Greatwood. The image I'm about to show you is taken from approximately the location I'm highlighting now. So this is the long view, so stood in Lepton Greatwood, looking down the open space that would be retained, and Woodsum Hall can be seen just there. The The proposed layout would not harm the amenity of neighbouring residents, with further consideration on such relationships to be undertaken at reserve matter stage when scale and appearance details are provided. Future residents would also have a high standard of amenity, with all units complying with the nationally described space standards. On the matter of highways, I will now invite Chris Dowes from the Highways Department to speak.
Thanks, Nick. The development which of 80 dwellings is accessed directly from Hermitage Park via a simple priority junction. The access takes the form of a traditional estate road with 5.5 metre wide carriageway and 2 metre 5 footways to both sides. Internally, the layout comprises of a combination of traditional estate roads, shared surface roads and private drives. As can be seen, it takes the form of a series of loops plus cul-de-sacs. In terms of adoption, it's been designed to be capable of being adopted, and it can accommodate service vehicle turning and manoeuvring within the site. The proposals, Hermitage Park obviously joins Rowley Lane. The proposal includes some mitigation at that junction to improve visibility in the critical direction, which is to the right as exiting, improving visibility, which correlates to the actual recorded speeds on Rowley Lane. That's an improvement on the current position. The proposals also include some mitigation measures at the Rowley Lane / Penistone Road junction, with the creation of an additional lane on exit, which is a dedicated left and right turn lane, where there's currently a single lane. That will accommodate the traffic from this development, plus phase 1 of HS2, which I think was for 75 dwellings. So the proposed mitigation will facilitate both of those developments. The impact of the traffic impact of this development has been tested on all on the junctions in locality, and there's found to be no material impacts on the highway network. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Lepton Great Wood is an ancient woodland, a local wildlife site and part of the Council's wildlife habitat network. A 15-metre buffer zone with 20 metres from trees to dwellings is proposed to mitigate direct impacts upon the woodland. This distance is considered sufficient to prevent any direct harm to trees or local ecology. Indirect harm or deterioration, such as through human access, is expected to be non-material in scope from the development. The Great Wood is already accessed by the public, with the increase of dwellings proposed minimal and with sizable alternative open space areas to be provided as alternative. The harm would be further mitigated through restricting the points of access into the woodland to the existing public right-of-way, where an information board would be provided, secured via condition, and other information provided to residents informing them how to treat the Great Wood. The report before members provides a full and detailed assessment of the proposal, covering the matters summarised here and other key material planning considerations such as drainage and ecology. However, the principal development is acceptable and the proposal is considered to comply with the relevant planning policies. A full set of policy compliant contributions has been secured, including towards the development of the master planned roundabout for phases 3 and 4. 154 objections to the proposal have been received and are addressed within the report. As such, officers recommend approval, subject to securing the section 106 and conditions as per the recommendation set out within the report, as well as the minor amendment within the update to members. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Nick. A few speakers now. First speaker is Steve Noble on Teams. You have 3 minutes, Steve, starting now.
Thank you, Steve. I apologise first for not being with you today. Unfortunately, I've got flu, would you believe, and I didn't want to risk passing it around. Now, the Green Alert in Lepton team have identified a number of major concerns with this application and the suitability of the land for the development. Given the time constraints, I will limit this presentation to 2 key issues: the devastating effect of the ancient woodland and the significant highway implications. It is very hard to understand why officers are encouraging you to ignore the expert advice from the Woodlands Trust, who are recommending a 50-metre buffer zone between the woodland and the development in order to protect it and the wildlife that it supports from harm. They're not saying you should reject this application. They are simply saying do the right thing by the wood and protect it from harm. If that cannot be achieved, then clearly this application should be rejected. Once this wood is damaged, there is no way back. From a highways perspective, local people and the council have been dancing around their handbags on this issue since day one. The simple facts are, highways, Hermitage Park does not conform to the council's own SPD. The council insisted from the outset that HP was unsuitable for any new properties. Then, presumably under pressure, they said 25 houses, then 40, then 50, now 80. It is little wonder that local people have no faith in highway services to take a decision and to stick by it. If HP was deemed unsuitable and unsafe originally, what has changed that makes it safe now? The simple answer is nothing. Highways will not and cannot answer that question, so we will. Nothing has changed. You have all been on a site visit this morning. From your own observations, do you think it's safe? Do you think it's suitable for use by up to 50 construction vehicles per day for the next 2 years, with all the exposure and disruption that such a level of movement will cause to local people, including primary school children? If you answer no to these questions, or you have doubts, then please refuse this application. And please bear in mind that Woodlands Trust oppose this application, the Parish Council oppose this application, our elected members oppose this application, and 97.6% of local people oppose this application. The correct decision is in there. The rest is up to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. We have quite a few people on Teams have just been handed a message. When you're on Teams, can you please switch your microphone off unless, obviously, it's your turn to speak. Right, next person is David Ward.
Thank you, Chair and councillors, for the opportunity to speak. I believe you visited the site this morning. You were aware that there was roadworks that restricted traffic. The schools were on holiday as well, so that restricted traffic. And I wouldn't suppose that you had access to the field at the top. You have sufficient grounds for refusal for this site, particularly on questioning on highway. A community consultation in 2016, given the nature and operational characteristics of Hermitage Park, it is a junction with Ruler Lane. Whilst it is agreed that a limited number of dwellings, limited number, what's limited number? Handful, could be served from Hermitage Park, it is not considered unsuitable for the whole development to be served from this one access. You've been, you've seen it, and you must agree with that comment. There is no way that that number of houses can sustain that road. It's a 1 in 8 gradient. There's no footpaths on Ruler Lane. There is a bus stop that restricts view at all times. There's going to be 80 dwellings, highway state, 48 two-way at AM, 44 two-way at PM, at an average of 1.5 cars, which is probably less than it should be. That's 120 extra vehicles using that exit. We'll have articulated lorries, HGVs, builders' wagons going up there, as Mr Noble has already mentioned, for 2 years. Highways state this without being a severe impact on the highway safety and amenities. How on earth can they say that? How are children from this estate supposed to get to the schools? Impossible. They've got to cross the main Ruler Lane. Ruler Lane is used as a bypass to miss Waterloo by HGVs coming down from Wakefield Road to Penistone Road. How can they say it's safe? There is also plans for HS2 access in Ruler Lane with a possible 75 more houses. That's another 100 vehicles plus. Highways suggest to help reduce traffic, we're going to issue bus passes. Who on earth is going to go from Hermitage Park across Ruler Lane, because there isn't a footpath, down onto Penistone Road to catch the bus at the other side of the road? That's not going to work. We go on then to the sewerage and foul water system. The foul water is going to be pumped uphill to a 4-inch drain on Hermitage Park. That pumping station is going to be working 24 hours a day. How is it going to be powered? We're supposed to be cutting back on the electricity, etc.
Your wrap up, please.
There's going to be noise, there's going to be smells. Then that's the foul water, the top water.
You wrap up, please. You've had your 3 minutes.
Right, I'll wrap up. I'll just summarise. Parish Council are against it, Kirklees Council against it, Woodland Trust are against it, English Heritage are against it. Even our Member of Parliament, Mr Barry Shearman, on a visit with myself and members of the area, was amazed that we were even considering building on this site. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Maria McCarthy.
Thank you, Chair. I object to this application on many grounds, but principally because there seems to be little thought regarding the implications this development will have on our local amenities, but especially our local education and health facilities. The application states that £225,821 will be provided for educational requirements resulting from this development. Nowhere does it state what this money is for, how it will be distributed, or how our current pupils and staff will benefit. There has also been no mention of how our health facilities will cope with the number of patients they will inherit from these 80 dwellings. Both our schools and our local health centre are already oversubscribed. King James's in particular has recently gone through many changes in order to provide for the pupils who are transferred from the now closed high school section of Almondbury Community School. How will any of them cope with the added pressure this development will bring? This land is a meadow, a rare and endangered habitat, and has historical and ecological significance. So I do not see how Kirklees have shown just cause for this development when brownfield sites still remain to be developed. I am deeply concerned about access during construction as well as when the properties are occupied. Hermitage Park is a peaceful cul-de-sac, and I feel for those who live there with what they will face during construction and beyond. Air quality and noise pollution, vital for residents' well-being, are two crucial issues that would result from the proposed development. What's more, government guidance states that building on cul-de-sacs should be avoided. Therefore, how is this even justified? I am also concerned about the safety of our children at Rowley Lane School. The junction of Hermitage Park and Rowley Lane is close to the school, and the area is very busy as it is, especially during school starting and finishing times. To add to this congestion, the building of 80 additional dwellings shows a real lack of consideration for the future of the area and the day-to-day existence of its residents and road users. There are pavements missing on one side of the bottom of Rowley Lane. Have the developers thought about improving safety for pedestrians, considering the excess traffic Rowley Lane will endure during construction and in the future? This application is actually for a small part of what is a much larger development area. Because these applications are being submitted piecemeal, it is very difficult to identify which will be the final straw. But I am certain that the camel's back will be broken when it comes to loss of amenities, pressure on health services, chaotic traffic and overloading of our schools resulting from this cumulative development. Finally, there is a lot more any one of us can say, even at the risk of repeating each other. All I ask is that you listen to our concerns. There is so much objection to these plans, I don't fully understand why they are still being considered or how they have even got to this stage. Thank you.
Yeah. Right, we'll just change clock over for 5 minutes. Right, cheers, Richard. Right, Councillor Alison Munro.
Thank you. I'm speaking as a ward member today in that I do not have an interest in the site, but I do have a other interest in 10.112, the disused railway line, which is on page 56 of the report. Thank you. I do not believe this proposed development is in the public interests. It is known we do not need all the houses that are proposed in the local plan. This site was high-quality greenbelt land and is now high-quality greenfield land, having been taken out of its greenbelt status. The development proposed is adjacent to Lepton Greatwood, ancient woodland, with a proposed 20-metre buffer zone. Any development so close to this beautiful woodland will be detrimental, impacting the wildlife habitat networks and flora. In springtime, the woodland is carpeted with bluebells, a protected species, but I have, in the last few days, seen evidence of bluebell bulbs being pulled out of the ground. The impact of humans is already evident in these woods. The advice to build a perimeter fence running along the length of the wood will trap wildlife in the wood, effectively destroying the wildlife habitat networks. The provision of information packs to householders will not address the potential for increased antisocial behaviour in the woodland area. Please extend the buffer zone to 50 metres. Woodsome Hall Grade 1 listed will be impacted by any development of this site. It is acknowledged in the report that some harm will be caused. I therefore do not believe this development is in the public interest. I have previously asked for a baseline assessment to be undertaken of the waters in Beldon Brook. Any building works have the potential to release harmful pollutants into this stream. But there has been no response to this request. This is a piecemeal development. It is not place shaping. It does not add anything to the village of Lepton. In fact, it detracts from it. This site is in isolation and does not satisfy PLP 5 of master planning and should be refused. Highways. Hermitage Park is substandard. The road is very steep. Sightlines at the junction with Rowley Lane to the right are poor, and the proposals suggest removal of a nearby garden wall which is in private ownership. These plans therefore hinge on a successful purchase of this land and wall, which may or may not happen. Please refuse this application. Thank you.
Next is Councillor McGuinn.
Good afternoon. I've got many concerns over this application. My concern number one is the concern over the effect on the listed buildings, Woodsome Hall and the Grade 2 listed building on Woodsome Road. It's a matter of opinion how badly it affects the site of the building will affect them. But I think the English Heritage did have great concerns about the particular effect on Woodsome Hall. I'd like to join other people in their concerns over the effect on Lepton Great Woods. The distance the housing is away from the woods is not enough. I agree with Councillor Munro and other people when we say there should be at least a 50-metre buffer zone between, if you're minded to pass it, of course, away from the housing, at least 50 metres. So that will obviously decrease the number of houses that could be built there. I also agree that the habitats of animals will be badly affected by fencing in the woods, not able to use the available habitat network already available. If you're minded to pass this, I would expect that any houses built would be made of stone. I know there is a mixture of housing types in Lepton and Fennybridge, but we think we were aiming for a standard on the old neighbourhood planning committee that should be a requirement that any building should be of stone. Although the Lepton neighbourhood planning group has folded at the present time. If you're minded to pass it, there is a problem with open space in Lepton. We are currently working on a project on Lepton Recreation Ground, and if there were Section 106 payments available, I would hope we could go to the Lepton Recreation Ground, because we are struggling to create things on that field. There was talk of a possible skate park, but there's lack of funding at the moment. So if you're minded to do that, could we please look at helping Lepton Recreation Ground? It is disappointing that the Highways Department has changed from their initial assessment in 2018 that only 25 units would be a safe limit to housing. I think myself and Councillor Munro went to a meeting with developers. This is before the local plan was formally adopted, and it was agreed by Highways at the time and by planning officers that 25 was the best that could be done. And because of that, it was decided, well, that's not viable. They weren't going to do it. So one of the house builder was involved in that plan, dropped out. He said, it's not viable with just 25, has to be more than that. At the time, I think they were looking for 150 on that site. Okay? I'm also disappointed that despite the bad sight lines between Hermitage Park and Rowley Lane at the junction of, they've said, well, we can do it. We can spend money. We can make those sight lines better. Again, we have reservations about whether the ability to do that. If you were minded to pass it, I would, although this is not a planning concern, we should be looking into permit parking on Hermitage Park, because that area is a drop-off point for parents. As has been noted by other people, it's quite near to Royal Lane School, and there's a problem in the area about dropping off children from the school, sorry. And Hermitage Park is one of those roads that causes a lot of problems for us, lots of complaints about people blocking the road with their big Range Rovers, stopping people getting in and using the road. So it's important we look after that Hermitage Park. Again, we've mentioned about Hermitage Park not being suitable as an access road for that estate. I really worry about the steepness of that road and the state of that road, what it will be like after the construction phase is finished. I did have a lot to say. I know time's up. Time's up. I'd say I think there's a failure to recognise on a lot of the officers' part the current problems on Rowley Lane caused by traffic, caused by possibly inconsiderate parents. And if you're going to add more traffic on that road at this time, it will just exacerbate the present problems.
Thank you.
The last point I was going to make was about the junction with Penistone Road and Rowley Lane. I think that is inadequate.
Next speaker is Councillor Paolo Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add a few words regarding my own opposition to this application. I'm going to focus on two main objections about the impact of this application. Firstly, regarding access to the site via Hermitage Park. The junction is already troublesome, subject to blockages and congestion due to its proximity to the school at drop-off and pick-up times. The road is very steep. It's 1 in 10. It's narrow and there is poor visibility, both for the traffic exiting Hermitage Park and for the traffic coming down Rowley Lane. This will be hugely impacted by additional traffic, not just from the comings and goings of the residents, which is quoted in the pack, but also the additional drivers of delivery drivers, the bin wagons, emergency services, and so on. And we've all seen the changes post-COVID. There is more and more home delivery, and that is more than just the local residents going out to do their own shopping. There's three or four vans can come to a property in a day sometimes. This is a devastating impact on the current and future residents of Hermitage Park, which is a much smaller development than the one that is proposed. I fail to see how, when the original application for 110 dwellings to access by this route was refused and a recommendation was made for an acceptable level of 50 dwellings, how 80 is now an agreeable level. 110 were originally proposed, a reduction of 45% was recommended, but the actual reduction proposed is only 25%. In the local plan, this is meant to be secondary access to the development, not the primary one for 60% above recommendations. The proposal goes against our own officers' own advice, and this needs to be reconsidered. Also, regarding the impact on the ancient woodland at Lepton Great Wood adjacent to the site, not nearby, not in sightline, but adjacent to the site. This is a 20-metre buffer has been proposed. At some points it's less than that. Now, a 20-metre buffer is considered acceptable to protect the roots of the trees and to protect the ancient woodland and the trees growing already. But it doesn't protect from seeds, it doesn't protect from transfer, it doesn't protect from the pets and the animals that residents will bring to the area. A 50-metre buffer is there to protect the ancient woodland from encroaching invasive plants, encroaching seeds and stuff. That is why we have the recommended 50-metre buffer. And what we've seen in other local woods is that residents use local areas and local woods is that local residents use the woods for tipping their garden waste. This is a direct threat to that ancient woodland and will definitely introduce all sorts of stuff. We've seen the creep of non-native bluebells, the Spanish bluebell. We see the creep of rhododendrons in other woodlands. We see all sorts of spurious plants growing up. We see it at the edge of everywhere, and we've all seen it. We know that's going to happen, despite notice boards telling people. Another thought I've had is about there hasn't been enough consideration made to the construction process, the access to the site during that time, the clearing of the site, the civil engineering works involved for the water mitigation plans, the road building, the house building, the contract and the materials will all have to go in and out via Hermitage Park, dropping mud on the slippery and dangerous junction, up and down a 1 in 10 slopes. How many vehicle movements will that be during a day during that process? Just something else to be thought about. Finally, I understand that the site is allocated for housing under the local plan, but we all know that the local plan is up for review very soon, and that those requirements may well change. And, you know, it may not be applicable anymore. However, I believe the outline plan is wrong for the site in its current form. The application does not give adequate assurance that the development will be appropriate going forward. Local residents oppose this application. I oppose this application. I hope this application is refused. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mark Johnson. Yeah.
Have you put your
Mark, can you please? That's it.
Are we on?
Yeah, it's on.
Right. Yeah, if you can bear with me, Chair, there's obviously quite a number of speakers have made a number of points. So if I can quickly counter through them and hopefully make a response to the majority wherever possible. Obviously, I'm here today as the developer's agent in support of this application, and I'm very familiar with the site, having worked on this site now for over 5 years. It is an allocated site. Clearly, the principle of the development is accepted in the local plan, and this outline is for 80 dwellings. And just to reiterate the point, is it's with layout to be approved today, and the reason for seeking layout is that many of the concerns that people have expressed regarding design, woodland buffers and heritage and footpaths and mix, they're all largely dealt with through this outline application because we've sought layout in the outline itself. We've spent quite some time in the last year working with Council, not just on the detail of this site, but also with the adjoining site with respect to the master plan. And I know that was shown on the screen. And clearly there is every effort being made to make sure that there is a coordinated delivery of these sites. It's not piecemeal, but it has come forward in phases. You will be aware that this committee has approved the first phase on HS2 for 75 dwellings, and that's the start of the process. This is the follow-on second phase. There has been extensive local dialogue, notwithstanding the local concerns that are being expressed today, is that in section 7 of the committee report, there has been 2 years' worth of local dialogue. We're very aware of the issues, and we've sought to address those points where possible through this application. For the avoidance of doubt, on the 80 dwellings that you see today, there is a stop point on the highway. There is no through road from this development to the larger elements of the remaining parts of this development, and therefore it is a cul-de-sac. There is a road safety audit that's been submitted with respect to the site access point, and that's now with the council and concludes that the access point is actually safe in its proposal. And there are Section 106 contributions which are, as has been said, policy compliant, including 20% affordable housing, and the biodiversity net gain is achieved on site. With respect to a number of the points that were made in some of the comments just now, there was a concern with respect to the pumping station. What I would say is that pumping stations on site such as this, where you've got gradients in elevations, are quite common, and that there won't be smells and there won't be noise from the pumping station. It's fairly standard practice, and that there is a 15-metre buffer from properties nearby. Schools, again, there's concern about the schools, but the school capacity was considered at the time the site was allocated, and therefore the contributions are to be expected. The comment about the site being greenfield and rare meadows, Chair, I'll take it I've got time to continue. Fine. With respect to the site being rare meadows, it was greenfield grassland at the time the site was allocated. So in effect, there's nothing new in that particular point. Water quality concerns can be addressed, no doubt, by planning conditions, and will be. Local public open space contributions, that's a matter, no doubt, for members to decide on. It's not for the applicant, but clearly we are making contributions towards local public open space off-site. As regards the 20-metre to 50-metre buffer that's been discussed today, the site allocation has got a number of requirements written into it, and one of which is a 20-metre buffer to the woodland. We have, through the design of this process, provided that 20-metre buffer. Clearly, if you then sought a 50-metre buffer, it would be contrary to your own site-specific policy, but it would wipe out a large number of the dwellings and make a planning application on this site pretty pointless. So we are in compliance with the policy itself. And then finally, with respect to construction traffic, again, it's not surprising that the point has been raised, but this is something that can be addressed through a planning condition as to where we can control vehicle routing and vehicle times. So with that in mind, Chair, I'm here just to support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
I'll start. I've got a number of things which I can pick up in another intervention, I think, but just initially, just some questions for officers, really. One, and we did earlier on the site visit, we talked about the Woodland Trust and the buffer. Again, I would like to understand, once again, our approach to this with reference to their comments, and also what impact have we done, or has there been any view about the impact if you look further, I don't know if it's to the north or wherever the directions are, but further up from the development where the ancient wood is absolutely right by other houses, what the impact of that has been and whether that gives us some indication of impact on woodlands when they literally are almost, in somebody's garden as such. So I'd really like to understand the sort of thought process around that, what we see in there already and what sort of impacts that's had, and our policy and our approach to the comments from the Woodland Trust. There's a number of other things, Chair, but I'll leave it at that one rather than throw lots of questions in at this time.
Through you, Chair, in the first instance, I'd like to invite Gareth Hay from Ecology to comment on the woodland. I'll then bring in Nick Goddard from Trees to comment on it, and I'll pick up anything else on those parts. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. I'm Gareth Hay. I'm the Biodiversity Officer at Kirklees Council. Just to address the Council's comments there. The standing advice, which has been adopted from Natural England and the Forestry Commission, is for a minimum 15 metres buffer from the edge of the ancient woodland to developable area. As we've heard from speakers before, this allocation ensured that we had that 20-metre buffer. Within that 20-metre buffer, we're enhancing the land that is there, so that will also produce measurable names for the biodiversity net gain score. That will allow sort of a secondary habitat to develop between the development gardens. We'll have sort of a secondary woodland and then the immediate adjacent ancient woodland. So it'll have a transition that is not effectively there at the minute. It's just grassland to the woodland, whereas this will allow sort of that progression and succession in the woodland. with regards to developments directly adjacent to ancient woodlands existing, I'm not aware of sort of any advice that's within that standing advice that's been that is adopted and is a material planning consideration. Nick Goddard, the tree officer, might be able to comment on that sort of shortly, but yes, I'll pass back to Nick.
Through you, Chair, I'll invite Nick Goddard, who's online. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Yeah, sorry I can't be in person. Yeah, through you, Chair. I think the question about sort of the buffer between the properties and the ancient woodland is one that has been keenly focused on by ourselves, but they've achieved 15 metres to any development, which is the standing advice, and then there's further 5 metres to any properties, so that's further separation. And I think the buffer planting is going to make a significant difference to actual impacts such as noise, light pollution, plant species, sort of seeds blowing around, that sort of thing. There will be basically a planting buffer in effect to stop that happening. The properties further north, I can't remember the name of the streets, just further north, they are actually closer to the woodland than the proposals. So I'm not aware of any significant impact there. I've not checked that, but they are closer to the woodland than what will be proposed here. I think that's everything of the questions so far, I think.
So through you, Chair, I'll pick up a few bits there. The Woodland Trust, have advised 50 metres. In their comments, they've given an indication as to why, but fundamentally they've just commented on the standing advice from Natural England. Natural England's standing advice and the Forestry Commission is 15 metres. Thereafter, you do a site-specific assessment, which is what we have done here. So in terms of direct impact, the distance will result in there being no damage to the trees. There'll be no trees within the ancient woodland removed as part of this, and no expectations for them to die. The main thing is indirect impacts through putting people nearby. Now, part of that is 20 metres or 15 metres. Those indirect impacts are going to be fairly similar. Seeds were mentioned. Seeds blow much further than 50 metres. Cats move, people move. So really, it's that the distance there wouldn't make a material difference. What we have is a suite of mitigation measures to try and ensure that residents don't act unreasonably within the woodland. Something to remember is within 750 metres of this woodland, a typical walking distance for approximately 1,600 properties. This is a 5% increase. So there's no direct harm. The indirect harm won't be affected by increasing the buffer distance, but the indirect harm is very minimal. There will be harm, there'll be a level of harm, any increase in people nearby, but what we have is a method or a suite of packages to reduce that harm to an absolute minimum. So again, the fencing off, it won't be fencing off at the moment. There is a dry stone wall. We'd look to have that retained. We want to keep access points into the woodland an absolute minimum, so we want to have that as the public right-of-way. So there is public rights-of-way crisscrossing through the Great Wood. We want to keep that as the only access point. There'd be an information board to be secured via condition so that people going in have every opportunity to learn about it, to know not to walk off path, try not to pick species and pick plants and that kind of thing. There's going to be there is a substantial public open space on the site as an alternative. So really the direct harm, there is none, and indirect harm is minimal, and the separation and the buffer zone won't particularly change that. Thank you. Oh, apologies, Chair. In terms of your question about assessments on other properties right up to it, no, we've not done that assessment.
Bill, Councillor Armour.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm not happy about this on a number of grounds. First of all, I don't like it coming through piecemeal. We've, from memory, about 750 houses proposed in this immediate area. This is roughly 10%, 9%, whatever. Now, we've just heard, because of the number of other adjacent properties, this is seen as a relatively small addition to that. Now, if we add these 80 to that, then the next 100 is a relatively small addition to the number. We're just going for more and more building. It's not thoroughly thought out, and I think, frankly, it's overdevelopment of the site. We look at Hermitage Park, it's a small cul-de-sac. It's originally been said, or it's been said somewhere along the line, that could manage perhaps 40 houses coming off this cul-de-sac. We're now looking at 80. It's a horrific junction. Rowley Lane is a very, very bad road. It's narrow, it's winding, it's twisting, and it's steep. Sight lines are very poor for much of Rowley Lane. It is not suitable for the additional traffic, not just from this development, but from the other proposed and likely developments. And we need to consider it all as a whole. I don't think it helps considering it little bits, little parcels in isolation. It's not giving a true picture. And ultimately, we've got road safety issues, as I've just explained. We've got impact on services, schools, doctors, etc., etc. It all adds up. We've all got these, we've heard the analogy to a straw in a camel's back. We've got all these straws coming forward, and it doesn't matter if it's the first one or the last one. Between them, they're going to damage that camel's back, they're going to break it. And just for a little bit of personal political interest, my council ward is the adjacent Kirklees ward. Penistone Road is a major road in my ward. It's also, of course, the major road serving this development and the other additional developments. We need to keep this picture in mind of 750 odd houses for that area. Penistone Road cannot manage that much extra traffic, not without very major works done to it, and there's no money for these major works. So all in all, I'm opposed to this application, and I think the whole master plan, if you like, needs to be revisited. We need to have a much clearer picture of the whole joined up effects. I think it's overdevelopment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few questions, if that's okay, Chair. Reference to the phasing. I'm not experienced enough to answer this, so I'd like the answer, please. Is this normal for phasing of projects like this, or is it a way in which developers get their total allocation through over a given period of time? So that's one question I'd like answering. Is the construction process a consideration, or is it just a part of the challenge of any project? Please. The original dwelling allocation for this phase was 100 and refused, and then stated 50 plus would be adequate, but now it's 80 plus. I'd like to know what's changed. Reference to that decision-making process, please. Hermitage Park, the road has been mentioned a few times as not being suitable as far as blockages and being too steep. If that is the case, why are we considering this? If not, could you give me an explanation of why not? And the several speakers have mentioned reference to highways. 2018, which I mentioned earlier, number of houses allocated. In their mind, nothing's changed. So I'd like to know. I think I mentioned it in an earlier question. It's just that I've been scribbling down as people have been speaking. I apologise if I'm repeating myself. It's an age thing. I'd just like clarification on what has changed for highways to say that now it is suitable. Thank you, Chair. Oh, sorry, one more thing. The recommendation. So in the recommendations, we're saying that there's several things. I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 things, including footpath, access to master, phase 3 and 4, etc. So it also mentions if the Section 106 agreements have not been completed within the 3 months, then I believe that it would be appropriate reasons for refusal. I just need an update on that. I'm sorry if it's written in the text. I've missed it, so I'd just like clarification on the 106 agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Matt. Right, I'll bring Councillor Pinnock in, and then after that we'll bring officers in to answer the questions.
Thank you, Chair. The problem with this site, or the site in general, is that it's an allocated housing site. So I'm not saying that one would therefore assume that anything that came forward on the site is bound to be approved. Clearly, there are issues in relating to this site, and various people have gone over these issues, including the topography of the site, i.e. it's on the side of a hill, and therefore movement about that area does cause certain problems in relation to the steepness of the roads. The officers at the moment are saying that that can be coped with, given suitable mitigation. Sorry, I've lost the point I was going to make. Yes, the point that I was perhaps somewhat concerned about is the junction with Rowley Lane, and the requirement that in order to produce acceptable sight lines, some third-party land is to be required. Now, my understanding of situations like that is that if the owner of the third-party land doesn't want to play, then the whole thing falls down. I would like to know if there is any certainty with regard to this third-party land, whether it can definitely be obtained in order to produce the sort of sight lines that are required. And sight lines are one of the issues that we do go on about quite a lot when we're dealing with planning applications, because they create a safe environment within which to move about, and particularly on the edge of sites, to ensure that collisions are avoided and so on. So I'd like some reassurance on that point, because it sounds to me that it has the potential to derail the whole thing if it's not actually going to work. One of the things I would say about the overall planning is that it is quite commendable that we have got a master plan for the whole of the allocation of these two sites. And that's obviously designed to avoid what was sometimes described as salami slicing of separate sites next to each other, and they don't match up. I think this can be done in this case, but there may well be mitigating factors that work on the other side. I think I'll leave it at that point. Thank you, Chair, and listen to the answers.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for your comments so far, members, and residents, and obviously ward members as well. Thank you. Very interesting comments. I think just in terms of a little bit of background and a bit of master planning, which I think is a theme that members have raised. Obviously, master planning has been done on this site and the surrounding sites, and that is so we can plan for the future through the local plan and through applications coming forward. And yes, it does consider phasing. Now, we'll show you a plan, and Nick will show you a plan in a second we'll just explain a little bit more about that. But in terms of master planning, It is obviously to ensure the efficient use of land. It's also to prevent the sterilisation of land and to ensure that infrastructure is brought forward, and in these terms, highway infrastructure, which is one of the key elements, to try and mitigate against the wider impacts on the area, both highways and in terms of the impacts of the development. So I think you should hear from our technical officers, Chair, Committee. You should hear from Chris Dowes in terms of highways in a minute. I'll just deal with Councillor Thompson's point about the Section 106. So the way that it's worded is, you'll see in the recommendation that if the 106 isn't signed within 3 months, then that officers have the power to refuse that. That is pretty standard. So officers can refuse it if the Section 106, or consider refusing if the Section 106 is not signed within 3 months. We do at times often bring applications back to committee where there has been a delay in signing. So that's a little bit about that. In terms of overdevelopment, which was one of the comments, overdevelopment, you'll see that this is an outline application for up to 80 dwellings. And we are, as we've said, we are only considering layout and access and principle at this stage. But as you're aware, it is an allocated housing site, so the principle is acceptable. But the question is, do you know enough by what is put forward by this application? And you have got details in terms of access and in terms of the layout, which seems to be very generous in terms of on-site public open space. It is a spacious layout, and it does achieve a significant amount of mitigation in terms of a generous Section 106 package to address the impacts. But I'll just like Nick to just talk through the master plan, and then if we could bring in Chris Dowes, please. Thank you.
Through Chair, just to come back on a few points of yours, Councillor Thompson. The different landowners and the phasing. It's a fairly typical approach. Across these two allocations, there's about 600 units, which is a fair bite for any developer to pull off. What we have also in this case is two different landowners, so we're asking them to work together, but with HS3, Phase 4, which is not showing, thank you very much. Phase 4 can only be accessed through Phase 3, but Phase 4 is owned by someone else. So this was acknowledged as part of the local plan that there is different landowners here, so the phasing approach is fairly typical for this type of development. You also asked about the construction process. It's material in that we can look to control it, but ultimately the fact of the matter is development has to be built. There will be a level of impact, but what we can look to do is condition a construction management plan to control that to the best efforts to minimise the impact, such as no deliveries during the school peak, which we know is an issue here, times, parking locations, that kind of thing. So there is a recommendation for a construction management plan. Councillor Pinnock, you mentioned about the third-party land. We've not seen that substantiated. We've not seen any documents to prove that that land is owned by a third party. On the other hand, council records indicate that it's all part of the highway or outside of neighbouring properties' land. So we have nothing to indicate that it would be a ransom strip, so to speak. So just in terms of the master plan, again, Councillor Army, you raised concerns about the cumulative impacts on Rowley Lane. So Rowley Lane would only have 155 units accessed off it. That was assessed as local plan as being the cap for that. So Phase 1 and Phase 2 would come off Rowley Lane. That's with improvements to the junction. As soon as you get to Phases 3 and 4, that's when the roundabout comes in, and that is looking to control the impact on Penistone Road. So Phases 1 and 2 are paying towards that, so that doesn't get lumped on Phases 3 and 4 and doesn't come forward. So the roundabout is there to mitigate the impact on Penistone Road. So I will just bring in highways at that point now to speak more about Hermitage Park. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick, through you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's important to sort of really get back to what the local plan says with these sites. I mean, we've got the two sites, HS2 and HS3. Combined, I think it's 598 and 600 dwellings. The local plan states that there'll be 2 points of access. There'll be a primary access onto Penistone Road and there'll be a secondary access onto Hermitage Park. That's what it states in the local plan. There is no mention in the local plan of numbers which will go either way. So this 50 may have been discussed in a pre-app or something like that, but there's nothing in the local plan that says only 50 can come off of Hermitage Park. In fact, the inference is actually that there'll probably be a join between the two. What we've got here actually is that, I mean, the developer did come in, admittedly it'll be in for a larger number. Their argument is Hermitage Park is an adopted road, it's a traditional estate road. Typically a traditional estate road is generally accepted, could serve up to 200 to 300 dwellings before you need a second point of access. We're not saying that. The local plan doesn't make a reference to that. It says it will be a secondary access, but it doesn't put a number on that. We have agreed a figure. Now we've actually got some data at 80 dwellings, and we've said we don't want a link between the two because we don't want unrestricted use of Hermitage Park. So we've got a scheme that limits the additional traffic on Hermitage Park to 80 dwellings worth, and as part of that, we've then got some mitigation at the junction with Railway Lane, which will be an improvement on the visibility we've currently got to mitigate this additional traffic. Yes, in parts, Hermitage Park grading is probably 1 in 10. It's got an average grading, I think, of 1 in 10. That is not uncommon for Kirklees, given the topography of Kirklees. And it's certainly, even our own highway design guide says that a gradient no steeper than 1 in 10 is preferable. It doesn't say it's not acceptable, and there will be roads in Kirklees that are steeper than that. So it's not outside of our guidance. It's been accepted at local plan stage that it will form a secondary access with no limit on what sort of level of development we'll be using it. We've got a scheme that will put the traffic from 80 additional dwellings on that with mitigation at the junction. From a highways point of view, there's no technical reason to refuse that. I think Nick's covered the third party issue. The third party land issue has been covered really. I don't think there's any other point that members wanted. Thanks.
Through Chair, just one other point to be clear on. This is the first planning application on the site. What we've got is a bit of a long history in terms of the local plan, a lot of debate from local residents then. There was the pre-app as well, but this is the first application where we've got this level of detail. So yes, different numbers have been discussed in the past, but this is the first time that we've had the full and detailed transport assessment before us. Each application has to be assessed on its own merits. So that's, as Chris has said, 80 units is safe, or can be made safe with the improvements, and therefore that's what we're assessing it on. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Carol?
Yes, could I just have clarification on whether or not there is or isn't, or will not be, footpaths on Rowley Lane itself, near Hermitage Park? I mean, because it was stated by one of the residents that there was no footpath there, but I understood there was at least one footpath there.
Sorry, through you, Chair. Yeah, there is a footpath on one side of Rowley Lane currently. As you get down to the junction with the Hermitage Park Rowley Lane, in the Bellmouth there is a footpath, and as part of the improvements there will be a drop crossing created for a formal crossing point to the other side of the road. So in kind of footpath provision, no, you would it's pretty much as it is now, and you would use the other side of Rowley Lane to walk up towards the school, for instance. Paul.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, officers, for answering the questions and comments, and also, other speakers and their comments, as officers said. I can absolutely understand residents of Heritage Park, being pretty upset in terms of this development. We visited today; it's a very pleasant area, and understand that. But we are looking at allocated land. And that's been explained a number of times. That process has been gone through previous to this, and clearly now we're looking at what we have in front of us in terms of this particular development. I do agree with the comment that's been made about the design. I think of the plans that I've seen since I've been on planning, this one has the most generous that I think I've seen in terms of open space and actually the mitigation, particularly around areas like the ancient woodland and sight lines for listed buildings. I've not seen anything that comes anywhere close to this previously. That's not to say it's perfect, clearly it's not, and I'm sure when we get, if this does get passed today, and if this goes forward, we'll be looking at further discussions about the actual detail itself. But I think this is a really good start. From my perspective, I'm satisfied with the answers given on the buffer zone. It was something that concerned me when I initially read the papers, particularly around the Woodland Trust. And I really needed to understand what the recommendations are and what we're working to. I think that the officer's answers make sense to me. I think it's assessment based on what we have here, and I think this idea of, I think it was described as secondary woodland, if I got that right. I think is a great idea, and obviously I would assume, and you can comment on this later on, that we put something in place to make sure that that is the case. I think that's the only thing that strikes me. That plan is there. Is there some way of ensuring that is the case going forward? So that's a question that I'd like to answer. The sight lines, yeah, they're not great. We were there today, certainly, and I understand from the plans there's going to be improvements, and actually there isn't an issue over land, so that's good news as well. I think that certainly again mitigates some of the issues there. There's no doubt at all. Construction phase is going to be extremely difficult for residents there, and that's an area that definitely, from my perspective, I'd like to see real rigour and conditions applied where we can mitigate as much as possible the impact on residents, because clearly there is going to be issues there. We were there today, and there was some building going on today, actually, not to the scale, obviously, this is proposing, but we could see, even with that building going on within that area, the possible disruption. So I think that's crucial. So certainly from my perspective, I'm satisfied. It meets the key areas that we've talked about. I've asked a couple of points of clarification. On the basis, I'll wait to hear about those, but if those satisfy me, Chair, I'll come back and be willing to move this. But I'd like to hear the answers to those clarifications first.
Through you, Chair. Landscaping is a reserve matter, so we still will get those details through, but we are going to now condition the ecological design strategy. So that buffer zone between the building and the Great Wood, that will be provided, will be secured by condition. Exactly what that entails is going to come in at landscaping, but it will be secured via condition. Was there another question that you asked? And yeah, there was a construction management plan. I think we have discussed it. Yes, that will be secured via condition, and we will look to ensure that it mitigates the impact on residents as far as feasible. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Pinnock.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just a point of clarification, really. I'd just like reassurance that either Condition 4 or Condition 10 includes a provision to involve local residents, since there had been quite a lot of talk about this, and I know that normally we would have something in there. This is one of the problems of not having the full text, and we've gone through that argument before. I'd just like to make it clear that I think it's important that when you have a development of this nature, that local residents are given as much information as possible, and preferably personal contact between the site manager or their appointee and the local residents, so that the local residents know what is going to happen if this gets permission.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, that is often something that members have raised at all the committees, and it is something we do as standard now. We expect them to detail the public engagement, provide contact details for the site manager, that kind of thing. So that will be inputted in the construction management plan and the environmental management plan. Thank you.
Carol, then Paul.
Yeah, just to come back on the ancient woodland again. And I know the actual design of the houses or the layout is not what we have here in front of us today, but I mean the depiction of where houses may go, I mean, having a closer look at it, I'm pleased to see that on the whole, well, no, entirely, I think the houses have either got a side elevation facing onto the woods, or it is they haven't got their back gardens facing onto the wood. And I think that's actually quite important. I think where that ancient woodland faced onto a back garden, or their back garden backed onto could potentially cause more problems than where it's obviously a front garden and there's a road in front of it. So I think, albeit whilst the buffer, the 20-metre buffer, does go right up to the houses, I think where it is the side-on elevation, I think that's important that it's kept as a side elevation as opposed to in any future schemes that house isn't turned round in any shape or form. So I mean, I would like to see, I mean, I know we can't say now, but this is just a message to the developers really. So please try to maintain this sort of layout that they've got. I mean, and what I was going to say, if Paul is going to move it, I will second it.
Councillor Davis.
Yep, on the basis of the discussion, as I said, I'm satisfied with the answers, particularly around the buffer, what I just had. So I'll move officer's recommendation.
And I'll second it.
Okay, so thank you, Chair. So it's been moved by Councillor Davis, seconded by Councillor Patterson for approval as outlined in the submitted report and update. So if I can start with you, Councillor Davis.
Yep, 4.
Councillor Patterson.
4.
Councillor Pinnett.
Against.
Councillor Thompson.
4.
Councillor Armour.
Against.
Councillor Hall.
4.
Okay, so the application has been approved.
Right, we'll move on to the next application. Just before we do, people watching at home may hear the odd noise of wind. I can assure you it's nobody in this chamber. Apparently we've got a brass band upstairs somewhere. So we'll make sure as many doors are closed as possible. So this is page 75. This is the Westgate Cleckheaton application, and it's Nick again.
Can I, before we embark on discussion of this, because of logistical problems that occurred this morning. Because of logistical problems that occurred this morning, we were unable to undertake a site visit to this site, which I was expecting. I would like formally to propose that we defer it for a site visit, given that I can't remember whether it's down in any guidance or not, but with sites of this size, we have tended to go on a site visit. Yes, I accept that we have visited the site in the past, but I still think that with changes in personnel of the planning committee, that it would have been a good idea, and obviously was going to happen given other circumstances, that we defer for a site visit.
Is there anybody willing to second that? No. Right. Nick.
Thank you, Chair. Just as a quick verbal update, Yorkshire Water have informally confirmed they no longer have an objection to the proposal subject to conditions. That was received via a phone call yesterday, however, it has not been received in writing. That can be discussed further if required. This is alongside the confirmation provided within the update. The Environment Agency's objection has also been resolved. Therefore, there are no objections from consultees to the proposal now. So, the application seeks full planning permission for the erection of 180 dwellings. The site is brownfield land, having historically hosted commercial buildings across much of its area. Many of those buildings have been demolished in the 2000s, with a few remaining generally in a poor state of repair. Since then, parts of the land have naturalised. In the local plan, the site is part of a mixed-use allocation. Indicative uses include residential and commercial. While the proposal is entirely for residential units, several commercial sites outside the red line will be retained, ensuring the mixed use is retained. So, apologies that it's red on red. And, sorry, didn't think that through at the time. But the point is red as well. But these areas up here are commercial units within the allocation, but which are outside. The allocation expects a high delivery of housing with an indicative capacity of 223 dwellings across the whole allocation, and with the indicative employment stated to be retention of existing floor space that is already occupied. While 180 units is below the local plan's indicative capacity, the proposal has been designed in response to a more detailed assessment of the site's developable area, as well as part of the allocation being excluded from for existing businesses. Based on the identified developable area, 180 units represents 34 dwellings per hectare, in general conformity with the local plan's target of 35 dwellings per hectare. In terms of housing mixture, the proposal includes a good mixture of 2, 3 and 4 bed units that responds to local needs and is welcomed. The site would be accessed from Westgate, with a central looping state road with several branching roads and drives off. Parts of the site fall within flood zones 2 and 3, which development has avoided, and that refers back to the undevelopable area. This land would instead be utilised as public open space. So, because it's a big site, I've just got some slightly more zoomed in images just to help members. So there is the single access point from Westgate coming along, and then it accesses the loop. And that loop continues down here, and then there's the public open space down south. The image shows examples of the proposed house types, which does include a small provision of bungalows. We'll mention this is a side-facing unit, so that is the rear would not be visible to the public. As detailed in the report, the application has gone through a financial viability process. This has demonstrated to the satisfaction of officers and an independent advisor that a full policy compliant suite of contributions would make the development unviable. This can largely be attributed to a normal cost associated with bringing this historic industrial brownfield site back into use. Following the viability process, officers have secured a reduced contribution offer from the applicant, with officers' suggestion on how this may be spent set out within the report's recommendation. Officers' suggestion puts a primary focus on achieving affordable housing on site, and then as well as ecological net gain enhancements. I now invite Highways officers to provide a comment on the proposal.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. The site's access from Westgate via a new priority junction, which is roughly along the alignment of Stone Street. The access is in the form of a traditional estate road with a 5.5 metre carriageway and 2 metre wide footway to both sides. The internal layout comprises of a combination of traditional estate roads, shared surface streets and private drives, and takes the form of a circulation route with a series of cul-de-sacs. The layout has been assessed and it is capable of being adopted. It includes turning heads capable of accommodating service vehicle tracking. In terms of sustainability, Westgate is a bus route. It's within easy access of bus stops on Westgate are within easy access of the site, and that's a service frequency of approximately 4 buses per hour, a weekday frequency. As part of the proposals, there are some improvements proposed to bus stop, providing a new bus shelter and real-time bus display to the nearby stops. The layout also includes pedestrian links to Brick Street to the west, which is actually a public footpath, and also to Quarry Road to the east, and it also which incorporates some footway improvements which give you a direct link to Westgate. It's also improved. The proposals are also proposed to include improve and refresh the existing zebra crossings. One which is immediate to the west of the site access, and another one which is to the east, approximately 460 metres to the east, to assist pedestrians crossing. These are existing zebras, but it's to assist pedestrians crossing Westgate. In terms of traffic generation, the development, it's anticipated the development will generate in the order of 114 to sort of 95 two-way trips in the M and PM peak. The impact of this traffic has been assessed on the local highway network, and all junctions apart from one will continue to operate within capacity. The Bradford Road, Hunsworth Lane, Whitechapel Road, signalised junction would operate slightly beyond capacity in the evening peak period. This would be an increase of, the development traffic represents an increase of just less than 3% increase in traffic, which is actually considered to be less than daily fluctuations in traffic flow, is not considered to represent a severe impact at that junction. So in conclusion, that from a highway perspective, the development is considered acceptable. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. So, in summary, the development would bring a vacant and unattractive brownfield site back into use within the urban environment. The number of dwellings and proposed mixed of sizes comply with policy and are welcomed. Therefore, the principle of development is acceptable. The layout and design of the units is considered to be attractive and would secure a high standard of amenity for future occupiers without harming the amenity of existing neighbouring residents. The proposal would not prejudice the safe and efficient operation of the highways, as stated by the highways officers. Due regard has been given to other material planning considerations, including drainage and ecology, and are found to be acceptable. While viability has been proven to be an issue for the site, officers are of the opinion that a fair and reasonable suite of contributions would be secured. 8 representations have been received and are considered and addressed within the report. Officers therefore recommend approval of the application, subject to securing the Section 106 agreement and the conditions as set out within the recommendation, with the conditions as amended within the update. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nick. First speaker on this application is Councillor Kath Pinnock.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few comments that I want to make about this application. The key one is to say that we as ward members, well, myself and Councillor John Lawson anyway, support the use of this site for housing. And to say that we were both present at a pre-app meeting 2 or 3 years ago now, and were supportive then. It has been a derelict site for a long time on a main road into Cleckheaton, and its development will be supported, I think, by many people in the town. Having said that, first of all, I have a question that I hope the officers will be able to answer. As far as I could see, there was nothing in the report about the removal of the contamination within the site. It is severely contaminated. There was an old dye works on the site, and it's been one of the reasons why it's not been developed until this application has come forward. So I would like to be reassured about decontamination of the site. Secondly, is obviously the big issue is the effect on traffic. And during peak times, traffic queues up and beyond the new junction that is being proposed. And so clearly there will be a worsening of traffic queuing in the town. And the consequence of that is very likely to be that traffic will use side roads like South Parade and Westcliff Road, and then down Kenmore Road to get to the Moor End crossroads and onto the Bradford Road and access Chain Bar. And as we've already heard, that junction is already over capacity. What has not been said, which I was surprised at, is that the St Peg Lane Bradford Road crossroads in town, which has been over capacity for many years, that sounds as though it's been accepted as being okay. Well, I can tell you it isn't. I waited, I think it was four turns of the cycles of the lights the other day. So, and that wasn't during a peak period. So there's clearly a problem there. And I would like to hear from officers if any further mitigation can be achieved for the effect of highways on the in the local town. The other question that's not been raised is currently Lion Sweet Factory, though it's not called that anymore, which is at the bottom of South Parade. Their employees use the rough car parking just off Westgate. There might be about 20 cars parked there, so I wonder what conversations there have been with the employer about where their employees are going to be parking once development begins on that site. So that's the highway stuff, and it's, you know, I know it's difficult, but I do think there perhaps ought to have been more consideration of the impact it will have. Then I've got, I think, about 3 or 4 more not minor, but other points to make. On the housing mix, I welcome that. It's really good mix of 1 and 2 and 3 bedroom houses. That's really good, and especially the bungalows. So that's positive. What's not positive is the lack of affordable housing on site, and I am concerned that that has not, the officers have not been able to push more robustly on getting an increase in affordable housing. Secondly, you know, you just wonder about, we've got a climate change commission and determination to net zero. I have no idea why there is no requirement for solar panels on every property, which would go a long way to help people afford, especially on the lower bed properties, afford energy costs and, you know, contribute towards climate change reduction. Another point I have to make is about open spaces contribution, which is destined to go to, I think it was West End Park, and then up the land, what you've called, we call the Conover, but it's Moorside Verges, you've called it, and Linfield Rec, which is nowhere near this site. So I don't know why that's crept in, or you know what that's about, but I would support the nearest then is Spen Bottom, so that would be good if that could be added.
You wrap up, please, Gaff. You've had your 5.
Yeah, just one last thing about GP surgeries, and I know there is nothing that planning policy allows, but I do wish that the planning committee could write to the Integrated Care Board pointing out that there have been nearly 1,000 new properties in Clackheaton and no addition to general practice capacity. And that should be raised as a concern. If it came from committee, it would have some weight. Many thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Gaff. Next, I've got Matthew Hesketh.
Let's see if I can work this. Can everyone hear me okay? Good afternoon, Chair and members. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Matt Hesketh. I'm the Senior Land and Partnerships Manager at Strata Homes. We're a Yorkshire-based family house builder. I've worked at Strata for 3 years now, and I've been involved in this scheme since I joined, highlighting the longevity of the project and the huge amount of personal time that we've all invested. Getting to this point has been really hard work, and we appreciate the willingness of Kirklees council officers in helping us to develop our proposals and get to this point where we're able to present the scheme to the planning committee. The site is a long-standing brownfield allocation within the Kirklees local plan and requires significant remediation work before it can be redeveloped. Despite its allocation for redevelopment, the site has been left redundant for many, many years. This is primarily due to the large amount of work that is required to clean up the site and make it suitable for development. The cost of this work is in the millions and has made the overall viability of the scheme really, really challenging. Despite these hurdles, we're now in a position where we have a scheme that works and where we can finally unlock the site for new high-quality housing. We would stress that the site was identified as one of the most unviable in the council's local plan, and that's certainly been our kind of understanding. And and what's happened throughout the project. We note that the site is in a highly sustainable location, close to shops and amenities, providing a perfect opportunity to deliver new homes for Kirklees. We're really excited to be working on this scheme, and we were looking forward to seeing the delivery of homes, helping grow and support the existing community within Cleckheaton. In terms of the set headline benefits of the scheme, we're creating a new, vibrant and visually attractive neighbourhood in a sustainable location on a brownfield redevelopment site. We're delivering much needed new housing, which will help meet the district's overall housing needs. The development will generate investment in the area in terms of construction value and associated spend during the construction period. Will create direct and indirect jobs. And despite the viability challenges, we're still delivering 12 affordable homes on site. The scheme will enhance the townscape street scene through demolition of the existing buildings and the replacement of new, well-designed modern homes. Green spaces are designed throughout the site, and an area of public open space with a play area will be created to provide a really attractive environment. Footpath and cycle links will be provided throughout the site, promoting healthy living and sustainable transport, and landscaping, including native tree planting within verges and throughout the site, are creating focal points and enhance the environment. Our development team have worked closely with Kirklees Council throughout the application process, and we now have a scheme which is fully supported by Kirklees Council officers. This is a site which is in urgent need of remediation and regeneration, and our proposals provide a great opportunity to see its redevelopment for new, much-needed homes within Kirklees. I would therefore ask the committee to support the officer recommendation to approve the application. Thank you for the time, just in time there.
Well, thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Got it in there. Right, members, it's over to you. Councillor Pinnock.
Thank you, Chair. There's one thing I must point out right at the beginning, and that is that ward members have been involved. And this was quite a while ago when we had a pre-app discussion with the applicants, and it was at that point that we as local members gained a really very favourable impression of the willingness of the applicants to work to ensure that this site got developed. So we got a good impression from that meeting. Right, I have generally speaking, as Kath has said, ward members are in favour of redeveloping this site. However, there are a number of questions which I feel I must ask. And the first is that there is no specific mention of any education allocation, although that does appear in the report in the section 106 recommendations at the beginning. It's not mentioned at all. Yet 180 houses, I forget what the quantum of children, as it were, on a development of that size would be, but there will almost certainly be some children who need to be allocated spaces in either the primary school at Heaton Avenue, which is full at the moment, or Wycliffe Mount High School. So I think we need to just go through that issue as to why that doesn't appear in the Section 106 agreement. It's already been mentioned, but the costs of decontaminating this site are considerable. Amongst the other things that were mentioned in the report, there was at one point a chemical works on the site, so heaven knows what residues that's left, as well as a card clothing factory, which will have a lot of metal residues of one sort or another. And there was at one time an ability to get support from government for decontaminating such sites. I don't know whether anything like that exists. Traffic. Now, it is mentioned in the report that we've got a junction on to Westgate, which is actually very close to a road on the other side. And highways officers are saying that it is acceptable, that there's enough room for cars to pass in both directions. I would like to know whether they've worked this out in terms of cars passing offside to offside, which is supposed to be the way you should do it, but a lot of people at such junctions pass the other way, which is not quite so safe. I'd just like clarification on that point. As Kath has mentioned, we've had the impression for many years that the Parkside Bradford Road junction in the centre of town is already over capacity, and any new development won't of course help that. Finally, really, I would be interested to know, and it's stated in the update, both the Environment Agency and Yorkshire Water have withdrawn their objections. And I know there's quite a long explanation, but I'd just like to explore a bit further what it is that Yorkshire Water and the Environment Agency weren't happy about, and how the developer has intended to overcome them. And I think it's important that they are overcome, because otherwise we might not have the open space on the site in quite a good location on the border of the urban green space on the other side of the valley. I think that's an ideal place to have it, but I'd like a bit more detail, please. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking forward to a brownfield site being developed rather than green, so that's one plus as far as this site's concerned. But a couple of questions, mainly on 10.100, which is reference to contribution. There's several challenges in Cleckheaton, but one of them mainly is the junction, the traffic light junction with Spen Lane, and putting another nigh on 200 houses on a road which is less than a quarter of a mile away from the project. I'm wondering whether the allocation of funds shouldn't be better used with expanding the junction with Spen, and also school improvements in the local area, because I'm not sure whether tossing nearly £200,000 into biodiversity would help the local residents more than maybe putting the money into a school or improving the junction there. But that really is my only comment, is the allocation of contribution, which will better serve the local residents immediately rather than at some point in the distant future. I think I'd like to ask a question where it says affordable housing, 9 first homes and 3 affordable homes, 6.6 of total units, value £936,000. Does that mean that we will be paying for those out of the 106 contributions? So that would be a big question. I'm just wondering why we can't put a condition in that the developer develop it in a manner in which they pay for them as the first 9 homes, rather than getting a contribution then tossing it back to them to have those homes built. So that's really my only comments and contribution there. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Mark. I'll ask Carol to come in, and then we'll get officers in to give you some answers. Carol.
Yeah, my question was just the same as Councillor Pinnock's about the education contribution. I mean, in the report it does say there will be a contribution of 357,000, and then it's not in the 106 agreement, so that was all.
through you, Chair, thank you, members. There's a few things there. Contributions, I'll probably come on to that last. I think that'll probably be the longest one there. So just in terms of the, I think contamination was mentioned. There are conditions intended to address contamination on the site. They have done the typical phase 1 report to identify it. They've started doing the phase 2. We picked up a few issues with that. So the phase 1 is a desktop study. Phase 2 is on-site investigations. It was missing a few things, but there will be remediation and validation. So the site was dirty. It will be made clean as part of those. So we'll just jump onto the so the main point said the highways safety was raised by Councillor Pinnock. So through you, Chair, I'll invite Chris to come in there.
Yes, thanks, Nick. I think the point Councillor Pinnock was making was to do with the access and the stagger between the access and the West Cliff Road, which is on the opposite side of Westgate. Obviously, the distance between the access and that is quite reduced. I think it's just over 17 metres centre line to centre line, which is probably less than ideal. Given, having said that, that's an existing spacing roughly because the access is on the alignment of an existing road. We're aware of that. We have had the vehicle tracking check that all movements can take place without conflicting with each other. It's also been road safety. It was also included in the road safety audit, which didn't raise it as an issue. I think the only positive thing with that is it's a right left stagger, which is always good because the vehicles are turning left off of the main road. It's not like you're waiting on the main road to turn right. You're turning left, so you're always turning left off of Westgate into either West Cliff Road or into the site access. So you wouldn't be waiting within the road to turn right. So that has been checked at Sweat Path to demonstrate that it works, and it's also been road safety audited, and it didn't raise any concerns.
Thank you, Chris. So through you, Chair, moving on to the contributions and the viability. The education figure, so what's reported through the report, and apologies if it wasn't clear, is the policy compliance. So a policy compliance scheme would provide that 350,000 education figure. But when we get to the viability assessment from point 100, they've gone through the assessment, they've proven that if they were to provide everything that is policy requirement, they wouldn't make a reasonable profit, they wouldn't develop the site, there's no incentive to do so. So the first thing you need to do is establish, right, what is a reasonable incentive, profit for them. We've come to the figure of 1,239,272. So we view that as the pot that we can take away as part of the application for members to choose what to spend it on. Now what we have there is officer's recommendation. In terms of affordable housing, they wouldn't give us the money and we buy that back. Sorry, that 936, that's how much they'd lose out by building that affordable housing and giving it up as affordable housing to a registered provider, or the first homes would be sold at a 30% discount. In terms of biodiversity, there is a impending legislation, and apologies, I'm not a lawyer in terms of the words, where all developments will be required to provide a 10% net gain. So that will just be a base requirement that's in law, that's separate to planning. In planning, we do have that 10% already. We expect developments to provide 10% net gain. So if you start off with the site, what is its ecological value? And then you look after development, what is the ecological value? This development is causing about a 20-30% loss, which is typical. So then you pay the difference to get up to that 10%. So that's the 20,000, the 200,000 there is to get to 10% net gain. Until that 10% is enshrined in law, it is a planning decision whether we want to reduce that. What we do have to get is a net gain. So we could have a 1% net gain. So we could reduce that figure from 20,000, which is a 10% net gain, to a 1% net gain, but that would only get you about 40 grand extra. So if you were to reduce it to a 1% net gain, as required by policy, as required by law, you've got an extra 40 grand to work with, which isn't a lot in the grand scheme of things. So going back to what we have here, this is officer's suggestion for what we felt the most effective use of the money for local residents after you've got the affordable housing, because the net gain. So the affordable housing we think is the most beneficial to the local community. The net gain is what the policy expects, and then you've got the leftover of the open space, metro, sustainable travel that comes to, I think it's about £100,000. Which doesn't go particularly far in terms of education. It's about a third. Ultimately, that's members' decision. If you want to take that money and put it into education, we can do that for you. But we thought the Bus improvements would help all of the community, promoting them, as well as sustainable travel. If you're not monitoring the travel plan, there's not much point in having one. So again, that's to promote sustainable travel there. And the open space, again, the most bang for your buck almost in terms of for local residents. But ultimately, that is members' choice how that money is spent. So if you want, we could keep the affordable housing, keep the 10% net gain and take the rest of it into education. So I suppose that is back over to members of the committee to decide how they'd like that pot to be redistributed.
Thanks, Chair. I'll come back to that in a minute, but I just did wonder, could I just have some clarification about the Environment Agency, Yorkshire Water situation?
Apologies, I missed that. So the Environment Agency's objection was twofold. Part of the development will be encroaching into flood zone, not houses, but they'll be raising the land level in the flood zone. So that means that flood water has to go somewhere else. That's called compensatory storage. So the applicant hadn't, to the satisfaction of the EA, detailed that. They have now. So basically, they're moving that flood water a little bit further to the south, fairly standard. The other point was just in terms of the culvert. There, at the moment, the Belden Brook goes into the site and gets culverted. That culvert's being kept, and they just wanted a bit of detail on management maintenance. That's been provided as well. So the EA issues are resolved. Yorkshire Water issue, again, was twofold. First of all, they had concerns about the planting of trees above one of their pipe works. Trees, ultimately, they go for the water, they damage the pipes. So, and then the second one was their plans didn't show all of Yorkshire Water's pipes. They did originally, and during amendments, they disappeared. A bit of a mistake. But the applicant has corrected that, so the trees won't be planted over the pipes, and the pipes are fully shown with appropriate diversions planned. So Yorkshire Water comments have also been addressed, but we were satisfied that Yorkshire Water's comments could have been addressed via condition, if not anyway. Does that clarify? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. No, I just wondered about the water flowing down the beck towards towards the town centre, in effect. Wonder whether sort of any allowance has been made for that, because some of that channel is blocked by rubbish and so on, or can get blocked by rubbish, and by bridges and culverts. There's a fairly big culvert that goes under the Greenway, or the old railway line, the railway viaduct. I just wonder whether there is adequate clearance for any excess water to get down that waterway to not to affect people on either side of it.
Yep, through you, Chair. I've got Paul Farndale behind me from the Flood Authority. I'll give you a response on that.
Good afternoon, Chair. It's Kirklees' policy to try and remove culverts where we can. But in this case, it's going to act as a throttle. So it's quite important that, you know, if man didn't exist, we still get flooding, you know. But it's important that we maintain where it floods here, so it isn't passed on to just south of the bus station where we have some problems. So that was agreed. We've actually had a meeting between ourselves and the Environment Agency, because there's a little bit of overlap here. It's actually classed as an ordinary watercourse, which is our jurisdiction, but the modelling is the EA's. So, as you might expect, we've got our heads together on this one.
Thanks, Chair. Just going back to what we've been talking about, the contributions. Just firstly on the first homes and affordable homes. Are the first homes the 30% discount? Is that passed on in perpetuity, or is that just a one-off?
Through Chair, they are kept in perpetuity.
That's fine on that. And the 3 affordable homes, I'm assuming those are 3 affordable rented properties we talk about. Okay. I agree with the comments that Councillor Pinnock made, and it's kind of stating the obvious. It is, you know, it's a shame that we could not, you know, get more, but I understand, you know, the negotiations, and I understand the difficulties on the site. So, you know, we are where we are with regards to that. So okay. But the mix that that we were talking about, referring to, and I think Councillor Thompson's suggestion about looking at education, I think is a good one to explore. However, I'd like to understand what the needs are, because we, you know, in my own ward we have an issue with the Section 106 whereby the schools got falling roles, and therefore the Section 106, which was put in place for increased numbers of children, doesn't apply, and therefore we're going through a very protracted exercise of trying to understand how that can be applied to schools. So I think, you know, applying it to education, I think certainly, you know, is a priority and a good idea, but we really need to understand then what the needs are around that.
Yes, just to come on to that, I mean, or on that point, I mean, just looking at the size of the homes, and you did say earlier, for instance, I mean, we're really pleased to see there's some bungalows on there. Now, bungalows are unlikely to house children, nor are two-bed houses likely to house school-aged children, certainly. And yet, the problem with Section 106 education monies, it goes on a formula in terms of the numbers of properties. But yes, the money comes through when the properties are built, but that's not when the children necessarily arrive. There may be lots of 1 to 5 year olds living in these houses in 5 years' time, but they won't actually need schooling for 10 years' time. So in some ways, I am comfortable with what the officer said about the monies going into a pot, which, whilst we are used to seeing education contributions there, I think at the moment the most important thing is that we get this site built out. I mean, if there is any negotiation about some monies to come to education later, that's when it might be needed, actually, because in 10 years' time, as Paul says, we have got falling roles. We do not know exactly how many school places we will need in 10 years' time.
Through you, Chair, I've got 1 or 2 figures for the committee in terms of the education consultation response. So in terms of the need, it's set out as primary provision, which is Heaton Avenue, and also secondary provision at Whitcliffe Mount. In terms of Heaton Avenue, the additional places would total 37.8, and then it's set out that there are surplus places of 30, so extra places needed would be 7.8. And that would be a contribution of £91,783. In terms of the Whitcliffe Mount, which is the secondary provision, the additional places would be 18. The surplus places is 3, so extra places required would be 15. And the figure for that would be 265,950. But as Nick has explained, obviously this scheme isn't a policy compliant scheme, but they would be the requirements if it was.
Through you, Chair, we'll just jump in there quickly and say, yeah, I appreciate the comments you're saying about them coming through. This is ultimately how the council have done it for a long while, and if the committee has concerns with that, perhaps that's something we can take back to Matthias and others in the positions of the council and say, is this working? But as it stands, this is the current process. This is how we do it. So if you want to put the money into it, that's fine, but it will come now and it will go into that system and get spent as it does at the moment, the normal way. Thank you.
To clarify then, in terms of like what we've got to play with, so we've got the affordable homes, we know. Biodiversity, we're essentially trying to retain that, are we, in terms of a standard? Because that's what we've been trying to maintain. And are you saying that the rest of that is really what we should be looking at? I'm trying to get clear.
Yeah, so if we can put a pin in the affordable homes, if we're happy with that. Yeah. The biodiversity, the question for you is, do you want a 10% net gain as per policy, or do you want a 1% net gain, and then you'll have about another 40 grand to play with? So that would be a policy breach, but it goes back into the viability justifies it in this case. So then you'd have the open space contribution, metro enhancement and sustainable travel, the figures there to put where you see fit, plus any changes to the biodiversity.
So it's just so if we left biodiversity in houses, just over 100,000 left, roughly.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yes, I hear all of that, but I note that the open space off-site contribution is 59,000. I mean, that figure is quite tempting, actually. Can I just get some sort of estimate as to what the on-site provision of open space might be worth in those terms? I know that might be difficult to estimate, but does the on-site provision, I'll rephrase that, how far does the on-site provision go to fulfilling what the open space requirements for a site of this size should have? I mean, in other words, what's the shortfall, if there is a shortfall?
Through Chair, I should be able to answer that, but it will take me a minute just to find the information. Thank you. Through you, Chair, I'm ready when members are. So in terms of the amenity green space that would be provided on site, the applicants, so the amenity green space is about £62,000 that they're providing, so they've got that, they don't need to provide it off site. The natural semi-natural is 43,000. Sorry, I'm diving in a bit there, taking a step back. We've got different typologies of open space. Tell me if I'm teaching you something you already know. So they're all categorised differently. So we don't just say open space is open space. We like some to be playable space, some to be natural space, some to be parkland space. So, and we expect them to deliver some on all of the sites. So amenity green space, they're providing all of that. That's 60 grand. Natural and semi-natural space, they're providing all of that. That's 40 grand. Allotments, they're not providing any of that. So on site is approximately 110,000 of open space using the calculations we use. So the lion's share of the open space contribution is being delivered on site. Thank you, Chair.
I think, Chair, that I would perhaps forego the off-site in the interest of creating a pot to help with a future education contribution. I don't know whether other members would agree with that. I know it's a bit of an invidious choice, really, but you know, some of the potential places that we could spend that are, as Kath has said, quite a way away from this site. So it's not a nice choice to have to make, but given that as colleagues have said, it's important that this site is redeveloped, and it's actually important from local people's point of view that it's redeveloped. That's you know, apart from queries about Amazon, that's the second most frequent question that locally we get asked. You know, when you're going to do something about that site, so you can tell it's quite important. And if you know, if there's a satisfactory response, then I'd like to move approval of the officer's recommendation.
Yeah, just following, excuse me, following from Councillor Pinnock, I wouldn't have an issue in us breaking down the contributions to retaining affordable housing, the biodiversity, and then pulling together an education pot from the, I guess from, I think if this is what you're saying, from the three other elements which give us a pot of around about 100,000. Yeah.
Through you, Chair. So in that case, we would keep the affordable housing as per the report, keep the biodiversity net gain as per the report, but combine the open space off-site of approximately 60,000, the metro enhancement of 33,000, and the sustainable travel of 10,000 into a single education pot.
On that basis, I'd be prepared to move officers. Oh, sorry. Oh, second. There we go. Second it. Yeah, I missed that. I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. So this is a vote to approve the application as detailed in the submitted report and update, and to make those changes to the section 106 monies as summarised by Nick. So if I can start with you, Councillor Davis, please.
For.
Councillor Patterson.
For.
Councillor Pinnock.
For.
Councillor Thompson.
For.
Councillor Armour.
For.
Councillor Hall.
For.
So that's unanimous and the application has been approved.
And that's it. Thank you for today.